I feel like if there is not part of me, my feelings, my emotion in it, I cannot defend that design later. There should be a part of me in that design.
Welcome. Maureen and I had the opportunity to meet Afsoon Pajoufar for the first time during our research for the book Scene Shift, U.S. Set Designers in Conversation. Afsoon is a New York-based set designer for plays, opera, and live performances. She comes from Tehran, Iran, where she received a Bachelor of Fine Arts and Painting from Azad Art and Architecture University in 2011. After working in film and design and production, Afsoon later received an MFA from Boston University in set design. She currently designs for productions across the U.S. and internationally. You may have seen Afsoon's work recently in New York at Lincoln Center, Theater for a New Audience, or on the West Coast at the Berkeley Rep, Pasadena Playhouse, and Red Cat in Los Angeles, South Coast Rep in Irvine, or at theaters across Germany in Berlin, Dusseldorf, or Cologne. Afsoon not only works at theaters who are known for producing new contemporary productions, she also collaborates with directors known for creating exciting work, such as Ashley Tata, Nude Adams, and Mina Salahpour.
I'm Maureen Weiss. I'm a performance designer.
I'm Sybil Wickersheimer.
I am a set designer, and I had the pleasure of working with Sybil on the book Scene Shift. This book is about conversations between theatrical designers, specifically scene design.
We have been really interested in continuing our conversations with set designers, discussing where they are now, where they want to go, and what they bring to the practice of set design. We want to continue that practice of talking to each other because it is such a solitary art form. This podcast grew out of that continued interest in conversation and the support of our creative producer, Taya Chura.
Please join us today.
To quote one of Maureen's students who is investigating Afsoon's work recently, she creates her work in such a spatial and imaginative way, it takes you to another world. When you're watching her set pieces, you feel like you've entered a beautiful, wonderful place. I love this quote. I love it.
Thank you.
I felt exactly the same. So, Afsoon, you've had such a string of spectacularly designed productions this year. It's been so much fun to look at all of the images, and I'm really in love with the images of Cold War choir practice. It's so much fun, and a little bit of a difference from the other pieces, I think.
Yeah.
I also kind of see a difference in the 5 models in ruins, right? Which is slightly different than your typical design work. So I would love to hear you speak about where you feel you are in this moment today when we are talking with you.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, first of all, thank you so much for that beautiful quote. And yeah, so I guess I'm learning like the rest of us as we are working is, part of it is just like we are putting up something for display for the public performances, but along the way, and I think throughout each process, I personally learn a lot of things, and I'm grateful for, as you mentioned recently, for this year, I worked with a lot of great playwrights, with a lot of great directors who are visionary in the field, and we basically, I guess I was lucky to be a part of very creative and visionary teams this year, which I'm grateful for it.
I'm so curious, and I often think this. Do you ever have designs where you feel like, yes, this feels like me? I can see, and then there's some designs that spring out and you're like, wow, this isn't an avenue I've ever gone in before.
Well, when we are designing, there's always, we are trying to be some part of us in it, unless throughout the process, due to some reason, unexpected things along the way, it changes, it shifts basically. But otherwise, I feel like if there is not part of me, my feelings, my emotion in it, I cannot defend that design later. There should be a part of me in that design, not necessarily turning it into like a signature work, because as a designer we are always responding to the script. There is like a script there that is creating like a groundwork for us to dance on it, I'll say. But I think there should be always something, at least for me, to connect with that piece of work that speaks to my emotions, and that, whether I want it or not, it creates some footprints of me and my emotions in that design. But as you said, throughout the process, sometimes things might change, and it will be a surprise to us too. What is this we are looking at?
Yeah, the moments that we don't know who we are.
Exactly. Yes.
I think that the point you made that I really relate to is being able to defend it, right?
Yeah.
So there are moments when a TD will ask you, is it okay if we don't use this material? And like, I need to have that personal statement that I've known and I've chosen this and to share with the TD. And often when I do is when they're like, oh, yes, we will get that material. So I'm glad that you said that, because I feel that way also.
In looking at those recent images of the work this year, I see choices that are fairly bold and, not just the use of color, but also in materiality and sparsity. So, for example, in the reservoir, there is a very little on stage.
It was a direct response to the script, basically, because the script, it's asking for a lot of location and a lot of like transition from this place to next place. And in my conversation with director Mike Donahue, I was like, what if we just totally choose like a totally different approach and not creating all these locations and these places, and see how the story evolves, how the story moves forward with this approach. And I guess it helped a lot with the production and how smooth actors were able to basically quickly jump from one scene to the another scene. And it was a totally like an intentional approach to go against what the script is basically built upon.
Interesting.
I think that's very liberating when you have less rather than more to articulate scenes that are moving. And what really plays in that space is the floor and how it reflects, as well as the fact that the reservoir is, it's a metaphor, right? And so you're sharing the metaphor rather than the realistic spaces, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, it was a totally like a metaphorical approach, as you said, and even the floor was like a metaphor to the main characters, basically his challenges for finding his identity and just digging into his identity. So it was speaking to the main character challenge, basically.
What was the floor material?
It was this reflective. We went through multiple options. When we were talking, I was like, okay, that's a look I want to get from the floor. But also, if we use this material, it has these challenges. It gets a lot of scuff marks. All those technical and logistic things. And eventually, we found this material that is mostly being used for TV studios, for like news studios and things, that they're super shiny and they're meant to be durable and like versatile to be scuff. It doesn't get a scratch as easy. So, and it was very, according to our TDs, our brilliant TDs, it was very easy to work with also. So it was a rolled material. I forgot the name at the moment, but it meant to be used for TV studios mostly.
When I saw it, it didn't seem like there were seam lines, and it just felt more smooth than I've seen. I know it's such a
something we look for.
Yeah, of course.
Well, there was some nightmares around it because nobody worked with that floor before. I mean, including myself, it was my first time. We were just like expecting a lot of learning and discoveries that it's not going to be necessary make us happy, but it worked out pretty well. And our stage management team, they were like maintaining it in such a like a it was like beyond what I was picturing, basically.
And for the lighting designer, did it also have to open up that conversation of a new material?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of concerns. Is like, oh, what if it's because we had like that backdrop, as you said, and we had this high shiny material on the floor, and there was some concerns around like what about if it like bounce on the
Yeah.
backdrop. And then I guess we embraced it, and it turned out to be, part of the visual vocabulary of the production. We just like, okay, we are embracing these reflections on the backdrop. It wasn't like, oh, we didn't know that and now it's gonna read like a mistake, basically.
I love that. It's so
Yeah.
nice when that does happen.
Yeah.
When the team embraces all of it. I want to just a little bit go back to what I see a lot in your work, and it's sort of the first time when Sybil and I we were wondering who's going to be in the book or what, and we came across your designs, and the thing that stood out is this bravery, like they're powerful images. So that was the first thing. There weren't like we only saw a few images of your work because before our book we really didn't know where to find each other's imagery. But that was the thing about your work. I was like, it's so brave. And now I see so much work and it's still so brave.
Oh,
And
I'm grateful to hear that. I'm very happy to hear that. Yes.
and so how do you hold that up? Because it's not easy to be the person, and we've had so many discussions lately about being the first voice in some ways after the playwright meets the director. We're then the next voice. So how you're able to go to that first meeting and feel that brave?
I guess again, it goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning is like I should really connect with the story, with I mean, once that things clicks, then I'm like, okay, probably this is the right feeling for that, that visual ecology that I'm creating on the stage. Probably that's the right approach. And definitely along the process, I still need to, tweak things and judge things based on limitation, what are the resources, or even sometimes if it's, especially if it's a new play, sometimes they rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. So sometimes it requires some responses from the designer to change the design or adjust the design. But I guess for me it's like that first moment that I feel connected to this part of the story, that it brings images into my head or create a feeling which is very internal. I don't know how to describe it more tangible, but it's very internal feeling that is like, oh, this is the feeling of the piece needs to be. And then I start exploring maybe some material. What is the material palette for the production, and research, which is basically my way to go always. Research, research, research. So maybe that bravery that you're saying, I mean, first of all, I'm glad to hear that, because it's hard when you're working back to back to back, just pull out and look at yourself from outside. And sometimes I'm like, what if my choices, become more safe, or like, become more conservative? How can I maintain these? But I'm glad that you mentioned that, Marie. Yeah, and I guess that bravery you mentioned is coming from, once something feels right about the piece, then
Then
we'll find a way to make it safe for the actors, to work with the budget, all those things that it could basically sometimes take away from that boldness or that bravery, as you're saying.
I find myself wanting to ignore the practical in order to really like latch on to that exciting idea first, and which is a hard thing to teach, right? Because there's always parameters, there's always budget, there's always usually extreme parameters, maybe about space, maybe about the situation, um, and I just have to sort of ignore it and connect with the piece on that level, and because I do think that making a strong choice and feeling really strong about going into a place where, because we may not have to defend. The word defend is hard, right? It sounds aggressive, and yet we have to do it we have to both come in with the strength to defend an idea but not act like we're defending it, because we have to fold in everybody else's ideas as well. And that I find so challenging. And sometimes it's so easy. And I wish I knew what the variation was going into the different rooms, you know. Maybe it's sometimes being in the room in person rather than being on Zoom is a big thing. I'm so curious to hear more about your approach and how, if there's a way that you feel is unique to you about how you research in order to bring that like support material. I think we each probably internalize our research. The research is is such a big part of my process too. But
yeah, sometimes it's like, you research and research and research to the point that you feel like now I totally feel the word of the production. Now I'm ready to move on to like the design process, which I'm sure I'm going to come back to it again at some point if I need like a clarification on a specific choice, material or something, I'll go back to research again. But once I feel like, oh, the shape is there, I can feel it now. I'm ready to draw some lines, for instance, or to build some model pieces and then tweak it again later. But yeah, as you said, Sybil, it's kind of a balance, right? Because we can ignore the realities or the resources or limitation to a certain point, but there's always like, okay, I have this deadline. I can only ignore it to a certain point, and I don't want to go extremely crazy that I have to cut it back, and by that time, we lost a lot of time. And those are the like a pragmatic aspect of our work, right? That's one of my like fears, like hopefully this pragmatism doesn't take away from that bravery, that like dreaming bold or big from my process. Again, I'm happy that you're saying it's still like visible in my work, yeah. But there's a balance there, right? There's a balance that
there was something I tried to use that I took from the David Zinn, which was, he said, some things I try to hold off on making the decision about for as long as possible. So on my last few designs, I was like, let me try it.
And how did it work?
Not for me.
It didn't work.
Not for me. No, they wanted an answer. And I kept saying, because my students often come to help me and they'd ask me, what are you going to do in that area? And I would say, I'm going to hold off on giving a really direct decision on that right now. And I knew that was the right response because I knew that nobody in the world knew what that was supposed to be, but they wanted an answer on that paint color. They wanted it by the end of the day. And even when I did say to the director, I'd like to pause on that, I didn't get a pause. I got a note in the rehearsal report. So
Yeah.
and I could have ignored the rehearsal report, but I'm interested in those moments. I don't want to rush certain decisions that I haven't quite found yet. And I know they're just about to drip in. That feeling like they're just about to drip in, but not there yet. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear you on that. It's like, yeah, sometimes, overall, I try to maintain like a certain percentage just for the tech process. Once we get into the room, I'm like, okay, now that 5 different options for cushion, for instance, that I asked, now I want to try it under the light. And, by the time that we get to tech, that's the first time we're going to make all these discoveries, but how everything is going to look under the light. Before that, it was under the work light. Before that was under the scene shop light. I don't know how it's going to behave.
And then you don't know how much focus to pull or to push, but
Yeah.
And because just adding those accents, you could pull focus in a really terrible way. Those are the fun things to play with, but I think when you're making a choice for an overall color for the room, for example, the show that you did with Tony Taccone with the red and the orange walls, that's such a bold choice. And I think it's such a beautiful image when you see the way that it shapes that space for the performer. how did you, at what point did you feel comfortable making like the color choice within that process?
The bold color choice was there from the beginning. I was like, it was kind of a reaction both to being a one-person show and creating such like a simple landscape, but
Yeah.
also speak to the story and like Ari's basically challenges in terms of like anxiety and identification. So it was kind of like it was also a balance, like, okay, I need to give him something that he stands out against that scenery. Plus, it's a one-person show. He cannot do a lot with the props and scenic. So it's better if he strip it down to like a bare bones to whatever is really necessary for this show. Um, and the shape of the set was basically hugging him. It was like
Yeah.
pushing him forward as opposed to creating like something deep or tall for, for him to get lost in this like a huge scale scenery.
It holds the energy.
Yes, that's the visual identity of the show basically, and it quickly became the visual identity of the whole production.
Yeah.
Like the marketing department at Berkeley Rep, they started using that in their vocabulary, and now in New York City they're doing the same thing. It was like, yeah, it was like basically the scream, that internal scream of like Ari's basically internal journey until he gets it out of his, you know, uh, it was kind of, I was seeing my work, like my design, parallel to what Ari was trying to practice by writing this script to get all these voices out of his head to turn it into an art. So it was kind of supporting his action, his act of like turning his anxieties into a piece of work, basically, a piece of art, basically.
Did you know the exact colors of orange and red you wanted?
Yes. It was exactly, I mean, we definitely like, we've gone through a lot of different variation of pink and orange that we got to these two, but yeah, I knew I wanted these two colors from the beginning.
I like the description of a visual scream. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to hear you use those words. And I think those choices, when you can make a choice at the beginning of a process and come in with the idea in that way, I think that's actually a safer place to put the boldness, because if you come in at the end and you add it or change it throughout the process, then in some ways it's harder to for the rest of everybody to adapt.
Catch up.
Sense.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, it's still to the end of the tech process. Once we did it for the first time at Berkeley Rep 2 years ago, it was still like, Tony was like, still he was still digesting it. He was still like, oh. And then after that, he became a fan of it. He's like, oh, this whole set is, the idea of the whole set is like, just be bold, just to be screaming. I was like,
good. Recently, I've been asking people this more and more. Do you have mentors that you go to, like that sort of support you through shows or your artistic pathways?
Not somebody that I go to, but definitely there have been many designers or artists that I've been admiring their work. And I would say Anna Bierbrock, she's a German set designer, so she's one of them. Yeah, she's definitely one of the designers that I admire. The level of details, authenticity of the choices, and basically the way that she researched for her productions is amazing. Is like she always carry like a camera with herself, and she's like constantly capturing like any new environment and town that she goes to, which I think, not knowing that Anna Bierbrock does that, I've been always doing like taking photos wherever I am as kind of taking notes, but like with photos with like a camera, which I found it extremely helpful sometimes, extremely helpful, even if I don't use exactly that photo in my work, but it created some kind of a, it created some depth in my visual vocabulary and in my visual library that whenever I need it, I go back to it and pull it out of the folder, basically. So yeah, having a mentor in a sense that I go to somebody, not really, but I've been following a lot of artists and designers' work and admiring their work. Yeah.
Your photography, it does show a lot in your design work. And so it's interesting to hear that that's what you like from Anna Vriebak's work, is that it's sort of got this looking at architecture in a very particular way. And I also love that on your website you have like and I forget the name that you title it, but it's like your working area. And so we get, yeah, I love that, your workroom. It's so nice to see that, because your photographs are really like they show line, they show everything, and then your workroom breaks down the line. And so it's like this mix of very pristine edges from your photography to a little bit of the mess. And then I look at your actual sets that end up on the stage, and I see that you're pulling from both of those sides a lot of the time.
Sometimes, it's a mess, like that Lincoln Center, 5 models in ruins, as you said. The story was really asking for like something that is falling apart, something that is crumbling. And sometimes, as you said, the story, it requires some pristine and nice and very clean edges, for instance.
I mean, it gets to show your range when you see shows like that in that opposition. And I think we're looking at our work from as a body, and so to see that range is really fun. In the avenue of supporting this conversation around our artistic concept when we come into a room, do you feel like you have a different way in to defend that work, and in terms of support when you work internationally versus in the States? So for example, when you arrive at your idea, from that point of then expressing it to your collaborators and within the shop system, how is the support different for coming in with those big ideas?
In US versus like an international process? Yeah. It's significantly different, I guess. I don't know who is our audience, but if majority of our audience are theater makers and designers, they probably know the landscape of theater making / art in European countries is significantly different than US. I mean, they're working on a much more extended timeline usually. They're usually like hiring design team like a year in advance at least. And one of the things that it reduces a lot of anxiety for designer is they have something that they call it Bauprobe. That's basically they're creating like a mock-up of the set on the stage for studying the scale, mostly the scale of the design and how that interacts with the architecture of the theater. So when I found myself for the first time in one of those mock-ups, I was like, wow, such a relief. You're making all these decisions in these little like scale models or like in a 3D model on the screen. Now I'm here, I'm walking between these walls. Now I can evaluate basically the height that I decided on that drafting. So this is the other difference. You get to see a version of your design on a stage that actually is going to the show is going to happen. And working in like, for instance, Germany in this case that I had experience of working there is like all the houses, like a theater houses, let's say state theaters, that they're state funded, they all have like a full-time employees. So they're up for like some challenge. They're like, oh, give it to us, and they're not worried about like that insurance or that retirement. They have it all. So yeah, and they also have the time. They're not necessarily working on a significantly bigger budgets than, for instance, off-Broadway. I guess what they have is like the time and really scheduling things ahead of time. For instance, the set is ready for my set. I mean, in my case, for instance, my set was ready 3 months in advance to the premiere. So that was such
Is
a
it at
luxury.
that point that then they start rehearsing? Or when is the rehearsal?
No, no. Well, like the recent production that I did there, it was in a specific timeline. It was like the season opener, it was like in fall. So it was a unique situation because they go for vacation, for holidays, basically from end of June. So the set was ready before they leave for summer break, which it was June, and they started the rehearsal 2 months before that. And 2 months before they leave for summer break, and the set was ready, they left. And once we came back in August, which the opening was in September, we came back in August, the set was already installed on a stage, and they had 2 to 3 weeks of rehearsal on a stage with the set, lighting, everything. Yeah. It's a totally different thing, it's a totally different model, which reduces a lot of anxiety for a designer to
Yeah.
make decisions
Right.
that it might be risky, as you said, Maureen. Sometimes we should make a decision right now without.
Yeah, I know. Get it in. But you mentioned time, and I love that because it is what I'm really missing more and more lately is just the time. And it's like I'm a decisive person. I love a decision too, but I don't think that like time is on my side, so I'm making quick decision rather than thoughtful decision. So to ask myself to make a thoughtful decision is important.
Yeah.
But I'm pushing against this time thing.
But it seems like something that's actually really achievable in terms of solving some of our anxieties here and some of the process and the systems here, which is often I feel such gratitude when I get an ask for a show that's in the next season or even 6 months out, because then I can read the script at my own leisure and just like let it sit, read it again, let it sit, because those are the ways that when I go out and see art in the world or have experiences, I can connect them and in a deeper way. And so that feels really useful, but it's actually, I think there's a time issue with where we place the rehearsal within the decision making and the actual like design finals, so that
Yeah.
if we don't have any access to even a reading or 3-day workshop or something where we can participate together with the script, then you are making all of these decisions without really the knowledge of the play itself. So even just
the growth
reading,
of it. Yeah.
yeah. So that feels like even in the longer processes, which I really enjoy, I really miss that opportunity to just hear the script read by real people rather than me reading it to myself.
In your head. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, especially if it's a new play, it's hard to also considering I've been here long enough now, but like I remember in the beginning as a bilingual designer, I was like, oh, what is this script is trying to tell me?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's especially if it's a new play, sometimes even when we're third day in tech, we're still discovering what is this weird feeling in here? What is this like? What is this scene? What is trying to say? And what should be my props choice, for instance, for this scene, or furniture choice to support the concept of the scene, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have
Maureen
a moment's
and I
notice.
we're designing a workshop for a production for a new play, and I actually really love that idea of it's also got its own challenges, but it's like it's nice.
They're trying a new approach.
Yeah, it's an exercise to try to support the play and the playwright.
Yeah, it's not a final, and they don't call it an opening.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But they are putting a lot of resources behind it. So I'm glad to be a part of that new process. I'm going to bring one of my other students to this conversation now. I just walked away from my student and I said, what would you like to ask Afsoon Pajoufar? And he said he was curious about like what feels right for you about doing theater design. Ooh. What is it that feels right about that? I know it's a hard one, but I could see he's also grappling with it. So maybe that's why he's asking.
I mean, I would say the meaning of it has evolved. In the beginning was something else, now it's something else. It's evolving every day. I mean, it's kind of responding to where I'm standing in my life in relation to the whole world. And I remember when I became interested in set design, I was a painting student, and I was dealing all the time with two-dimensional uh, disciplines, basically, which was painting on canvas all the time. And for the first time, I heard about like David Hockney is a painter who is also doing set design. I was like, oh, that is a nice overlap, and there should be some relation in here. I'm sure all these things that I'm learning, I don't need to discard it. It's going to support even if I want to shift into three-dimensional or 3D space, basically, form of art. And that was a moment that basically set design that is sparked
The
in my
layering.
head. And yeah, exactly. And I was like, I want to deal with the three-dimensionality. I want to pull all those images or all those composition that I'm creating on a canvas in a three-dimensional space. So that was the beginning, how I was feeling by doing set design and why I wanted to do it. It was just my obsession with the 3D space, the three dimensionality of this discipline. Uh, and now I'm getting more like it evolved to a part that I'm now more interested in like conversations in the field as a designer. How am I contributing to the field, and how am I helping with the evolving of the industry basically as a designer? Yes, so it changed.
My student is a painter also, so that's
Oh,
yeah. So that
Oh,
will be
that's interesting.
yeah.
I
that's
mean,
interesting.
I think I'm curious how you might apply that to your work in the future. Like we had started talking a little bit last week about systems that we could push in terms of sustainability and in terms of
Yeah.
practice. So if your interest in 3D space and in the storytelling element is growing, then where do you see yourself being able to push the industry?
One of the things that I'm interested, well, first of all, I guess our role and how it's being perceived by institutions and by the system, it should a little bit change. We are not necessarily decorators. We are not necessarily creating decors or something for only for a nice image. I guess we are by our design work, we are creating like a ecosystem on a stage that is contributing to the future of the production. And if we can be integrated into the process earlier, like a budgeting, like logistic of recycling our design as opposed to discarding it, that would be helpful. But I guess I'm jumping. This is like such a jump.
No, I don't think it is. I actually think you're right on. And because it goes to the core of how the images that we are producing and that are being fed to the public, so
Yeah.
much of that is the set. It's of course
Yeah.
the lighting and the costumes also, but when we see an image from a production, we're drawn to a concept and a clarity of that image to tell the story and to attract people to see that show. And I see that in your work that I would be attracted to see that show, right? So if that's the kind of imagery that we're producing as set designers, right? That we're one of the first elements that create and contribute to the whole production concept that then feeds into that, those images being made, then we really are a little more like producers, right?
Yeah.
In that landscape. And so I think the visuals are becoming much more front and center. I would first like to see that in the images, perhaps they note the design teams, not just the photographer who took the photo, which I think is really a strange way to put that to label an image, if that makes sense. But I do appreciate really strong theater photography. So I understand the need to put the photographer's image name there as well. I think that's really important. But I don't think the respect isn't there. I think it's actually not being named, or that we're not asking for that respect. Does that make sense? As a group.
Wow. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, but I agree. There's this. I don't really want my ego in it at all. You know, that's why I think I'm beneficial, though. I'm not saying it is, but there's this beneficiality of being a background person that is just like trying to push the idea forward, and I'm not worried. Like, I'm trying to see the story really clearly. I don't have a big stake in the longevity of this being a show I directed, a show I produced, right? Or I'm not an actor. So I think the knowledge that that's what we're doing is more what I want people to know, is like, I am looking out for this play equally. Sometimes I feel like there's a moment where I think they think we're trying to visually get in the way of it. The last show that I did, you know, the comment was, well, the set is too much of a character. Like, the actors are saying it's upstaging them. We should probably cut this. And I felt very guilty, but I never didn't think this set was a character. Like, I always thought it was a character, right? So I'm not sure what I'm saying, but I don't know if I want to be I don't want my name with it. I don't need anybody to know that thing, right? But I don't know. I don't know. Like, I like the neutrality of not being the lead, that thought of as the lead.
That's very humble of you, Maureen.
I don't know. I just want to be the helper. Can I be the helper? And I think that's okay. I don't know. But I mean, also, everything you said was really brave. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there is a lot of emphasis put on the design right now, and I feel both happy about that and also a little fearful about that, because as individuals, I find it very challenging to live in this industry, right? But on the other hand, the work isn't the challenge. It's actually the benefits we get from the work, right? And like the payment and so at the very least, it seems that, considering how much the concept is reliant on us, that the balance is shifting. And so I have suggested a few times, when the budgets are small, that instead of putting the money to materials, I would rather see that come to myself and my assistant, you know, whoever is helping me to do the work, to pare down the set, keep the strong ideas, and allow us to feed ourselves and pay ourselves at least a living wage. And most of that goes to an assistant that's helping you, right, to deliver details. But I think that that's where I would rather see the money go, rather than like, okay, we have another few thousand for the materials. If we have to cut something, I think we can pare it down often and still retain the big idea.
Do you have a lot of assistants, out of curiosity? Like, because you're doing so many shows, I don't know how you're doing it. I really do not.
I guess I developed some muscles in past couple of years, but just to be honest, I try to, you know, cap the number of productions that I'm taking each year. And as you said, is like partially is like the financial aspect of it, that we all have to live a life anyways in New York, in LA, San Francisco, all these expensive towns, right? And part of it is like the quality of the work, and I just want to make sure each production that I'm taking, especially I have a close circle of collaborators, that I want to make sure that I'm present for them. So that is the other reason I try to cap the number of the production that I'm taking every year. I just don't want to be like, show up to the tech with a compromised focus for this production. I'm not here, I'm not there. And then, it's valuable, all the connection that I have with the directors who are trusting me, with the playwrights who are trusting me. So I just want to make sure I'm there, I'm present for them. So I work, I usually have not at least, we don't get more than one assistant for each production, right? So I try to hire one assistant for each production. So sometimes, like in this case now in this season, which is very busy, I'm working with 3 assistants for 3 productions that is overlapping. And I'm grateful for the support of all my assistants. It's like, yes, just in a full transparency. We design, we sometimes we are disheveled and we don't know what we want. And like my assistants really help me to clean up and, shuffle through those thoughts and just get it organized.
Yeah. Do you do your drafting or do you hand that off to assistants?
My process, I design in 3D softwares. So basically by the time that I have the first draft of design, meaning I have a version of drafting, but it's not 2D. So I hand it to my assistant that 3D file and they turn it into 2D, which is a separate conversation. Why are we still doing this? Well, 3D model basically.
Just hand it off.
Exactly. It has all the information from material.
Yes, I know. I mean, Sybil, we turned in I think it was a beautiful drafting package that Sybil on sabbatical has been really working to create such a pretty drafting package. But I have that thought a lot where I'm like, it's all here.
Yeah.
Just open.
Yeah.
Well, I recently learned that you also use Rhino.
I do Rhino. Yeah, I work with multiple softwares. This is also like a outcome of pandemic, which I self-taught myself all these different softwares. Some game engines that I use for renderings, and this is also part of that sustainability practice. Talking about that, I was able, since I have a control over my process, to minimize the material discard when design is in the extremely early stages. So I delay making the model until we have some ideas. So that helps with, eliminating extra material discard. So I start in 3D model. And sometimes if I need to check something that is tricky, I use like a VR goggles just to go into the 3D software and check the sight lines or get the sense of a scale. This is part of a sustainability and just how I am practicing it in my own design process.
We tried, Sybil and I, for a little bit, and we still are holding, but we tried to keep some of our scenic elements from some of our shows, and we're housing them. And we were trying to say, if people, a few people have come to us, they're saying they'd like a set, and we have offered, well, we have these pieces. Do you want to use them? We haven't had any takers yet, but it was a thought of how do we keep this sustainable? We have some really cool pieces that if we put them in a certain position, they create a whole new idea.
We have to have a person who is in support of that idea. And I think if we were able to, because the pieces that we've held are more like
neon
art pieces. They're neon and they're art pieces. They're not necessarily platforms, which is a very rentable item. And so I think our idea as gallerists, could we hold set pieces and then rent them out and actually have a sustainable practice in that way? And it's just such a big idea that you need the space, you need coordination, and then you need somebody who's really interested in listening to that idea. So we've pitched it a few times. It hasn't quite landed. I think we're finding our way through it, but I would love to really take that to an actual level where it's usable,
Yeah, and it could just go through a chain of designers that choose one of their pieces from each show and say, hey, can I hold on to that? Because it's not too much of a footprint for you to hold on to.
Yeah.
But then we have a pool of these little elements that we could pull from.
Yeah, I guess one of the reasons that this idea is the idea of creating like a material library or some single element library is the challenge of, storage. Is the space, whether on East Coast or West Coast, we know, what are the financial consequences of creating such a library for like something that needs to get shipped across the country back and forth. Yeah, I've been thinking about that for a couple of years. I cannot say I have a clear answer to it, but for it yet, but I'm just like keep just marinating this idea of what it means having a library, what it means getting institution support to create a library. I don't know. We have a lot of land in this country, for cheap prices in the middle of nowhere if we can get something to create a material library.
Well, also the investment, like the initial investment, which I was thinking when Biden was still president, you could apply for a startup grant for companies run by women. And it was a $50,000 startup. And I was like, that would be the right way to do this, right? Because that initial money would really help to like find the right avenue forward for that kind of idea. But now it doesn't exist. So we have some thoughts about, the systems here in the U.S. I wondered if there's anything else that you might want to tell us about you as an artist and as that you want to put out into the world.
I wanted to really appreciate and acknowledge your hard work that started back in pandemic, and it basically created. It was such a it was such a time, right? We all were discovering this Zoom platform, and we all got together, and we had like a shared moment to exchange ideas, which I'm grateful for it, and I appreciate your hard work. And again, acknowledging that you maintain this conversation among the industry people, and you're inviting them throughout, different events and different situations, as an exhibition, as a podcast. So I really appreciate your hard work, and I know that our industry really needs this kind of moves more and more to maintain a constant conversation, lectures, learning, exploring, discovering, just, how to support our industry to make it more sustainable industry. So not every year we have to deal with this terror of theater is dying, because we're bringing this new generation to this industry. Let's at least create an environment that they feel safe in it, and they also feel motivated enough to bring their ideas and contribute to the sustainability of our industry, basically.
Thank you for all that you said. And, we're one of the most important things that we've discovered over the last, 5 years since starting the book project is just the benefit of talking to all of these set designers. And, one of the things I love about your website is you have a collaborators, page. And when we spoke last week, you spoke about Masha and working with her a lot this year. And so I was really going into a deep dive of her work, and it just was so fantastic. I also love that she's a huge fan of Colleen Smith, who is an amazing artist. And I went to see her just before I came out here in the spring. I saw her at a talk she gave at USC in this tiny little venue, and she signed the book I have of her work. And she was so cute about it. She's like, "You want me to sign this?" I was like, "Yeah."
Sure.
It was really cute, but it really just, I love finding these little connections and learning about designers. So it was really nice to also go through her work, which is fantastic.
She's a brilliant designer. It's such a gift to have her as a collaborator on my work. It's like, yeah, she's like great in terms of dramaturgy, understanding the design, and just showing up to the room as a real collaborator and just really working around each other. It's great having her as a collaborator on my productions.
Well, I'm looking forward when I'm in New York in the spring and summer. I really hope to come and see some of your work in person. So
yes, would love to meet you in person.
Yeah, I know. I can't
finally after 5 years.
We've tried a few times. But
I know, but yeah. But thank you so much, Sybil. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and It's such a pleasure every time we have a moment to talk to each other.